Welcome to Engaging ESG, where we consider, challenge, and celebrate the evolving world of environmental, social, and governance communications. I'm Jennifer Owen, Senior Director of Marketing at Caesar.
And I'm Kati Callens, Global Sustainability Lead at Adobe. For Season 3, we're talking with climate communications leaders who are shaping the future of sustainability messaging. From connecting with stakeholders to crafting compelling impact stories, we'll uncover the strategies that worked and learn from those that didn't.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or new to the field, you'll find practical tips and insights in every episode.
And whether you're working on your first sustainability report or reimagining your organization's climate narrative, these conversations will help you navigate the complexities of ESG communications. Let's get started.
Well, hello, Kati.
Hello, Jen. We are in person.
This is very exciting. We're sitting at just having experienced New York Climate Week.
Yes, and just walked the beautiful streets of Brooklyn near Jen's home.
Yes, you all are not welcome to join me in my home. But it was lovely to show Kati around the neighborhood. You can't help but point out all the celebrity
Yeah,
sighting.
there's a lot of celebrities that live in Jen's neighborhood. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
Also, this is the first time that Jen and I have seen each other in person since we started the podcast.
That's crazy.
So that was really exciting. There was some squealing. There was some hugging when I got to see her a couple of days ago, and such a treat to get to see you now.
Now it's old hat because we've seen each other like every day.
Almost every day.
Almost every day.
One day I scared her. I snuck up behind her and she didn't scream, which was great. That was in Solutions House. Shout out to Foodterra.
Yes.
Amazing programming.
Yes. Because you're about to ask me a question about one of the best events.
Yes. So I was telling Jen that one of my favorite ways to check in with folks about an event or their experience is to do the little framework that we call high-low weirdo, similar to Rosebud Thorn. Just some little snapshots of the highest point, the lowest point, a weird thing that surprised you that happened. And so we're going to go into a bit more detail of thoughts, reflections on Climate Week generally, but I thought we could start out with high-low weirdo.
Yeah.
And I can go first.
Yeah, go first. As the person with the framework.
As the person with the very detailed framework. So yeah, I would say the high point for me was our Adobe event, I would say. It was Adobe's first New York Climate Week event focused on the intersection of creativity, conservation, and the power of storytelling. We were at LinkedIn's beautiful office in the Empire State Building. It was very hard to get into that office, but once we did, it was incredible. And we got to highlight Conservation International and Bush Heritage Australia, two incredible global organizations leading conservation across the globe, and just have a really good conversation.
And actually put an Oculus thing on my headset for the first time after years of talking about it and seeing what Conservation International has done with it. Oh my gosh, that was really cool. It was really cool.
So it was a popcorn panel where we chatted a bit about the state of storytelling tools, platforms, strategies, but then we went into what I call the storytelling salon, where we had booths set up by all of those organizations, plus grid alternatives, so people could actually experience the storytelling projects. And Conservation International, or CI, as I call them, had these incredible VR headsets where you could go. I think I went scuba diving.
Yes.
On one of
and you would look
projects.
up and the guy was floating above you, swimming with you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It was great.
Well, he was talking about his story.
And the text, it was 3D. It was really great. It was like, and it told a very succinct narrative that was very, was gripping and emotional, even as it was beautiful.
Yeah, no, it was really incredible. So that was a high for me. I would say a low was a moment that Jen and I had. It was kind of a Jack and Rose Titanic moment when we were trying to go up the Empire State Building after my event. And I thought I bought us 2 tickets up to the top of the Empire State Building, but only one printed out. And we were like, okay, cool, going through all the levels of security until we got to the point where we realized that no.
We had to split. I had to put her on the raft and send her up to the top. And I went back into the sea.
Yeah. She was like, I live here. You go see
it.
And I did, and we could share a photo.
Yes.
But it was really sad not to have my co-host there.
Literally, the crowd took you away.
I was like, I'll say hi to you at the top for you, Jen.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was rough, but it was good.
Yeah. So low right after the high. And I would say a weirdo for me was getting kind of dizzy in the subways.
Oh.
So just like I'm coming from San Francisco, so we don't really have this like humid rain summer situation.
Sure.
And so that plus like being jam packed in a subway. Obviously, we love the public transit in New York,
Yep.
but I was going from an incredible ferry tour to see some eco concrete that we landed at Wall Street. And then I was going up to Midtown to go to the Yale Club to go to an AI sustainability event. And I just at one point had to like sit down and just be like, okay, where are we? What is up? What is down? So,
yeah.
But it was good to get to take public transit. But anyway, that's my high-low weirdo for the week.
Mine would be, there was a moment at the Solutions House where they had a panel talking about, the question was, do carbon markets actually work? And so, of course, Miss Carbon Markets has to go and it's, of course, the answer is yes. They're a mess. A lot of work has to be done, but yes. But they had on these two women. One is a county agent for a county in Georgia, and then a landowner in Georgia, and talking about reforestation credits. And one of them started to tear up, talking about the generational ownership of the land and how important this financial product of carbon credits is helping them stay on their land. And, and you can say it, and everyone says we have to get the story better and all this sort of stuff. But it's always to remember that there are actual people living on that land who are using these tools to actually make it work. And that was really a high point. And that the county agent said, now, if you've been around since the 80s, reforestation is a bad word because in the 80s, that's the word the government used to force you to plant trees on your land to get any money to save your farm during a drought. And it was, a very tough moment for the farms in that area. And they're like, okay, it's like gentrification, some people can see it as a good word. Some people see it as a really terrible cudgel that's moving you out of your neighborhood. And so if you come in using that word, immediately people are defensive against it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, those folks were incredible. It was a reforestation project as part of the Beyond Alliance, which is a really interesting corporate partnership that our former employer Meta and other folks are included. We'll share some links to information about the project because there was a documentary as well that I went to later that night, actually, at Global Citizen, and really the story of these farmers. And one of the quotes from that same county contact, extension agent.
Yes,
that's what
she works with the farmers there.
Yeah, we'll look up her name. We obviously didn't research that before.
Before we started talking.
I'm my decaffeinated myself.
Sure.
But so she had a great quote from the documentary that she then discussed in the panel afterwards, which she said, I hate pine trees. And so to be in a room of climate folks saying, I hate pine trees. But in the panel, she explained, building your story right now, was that when farmers in the Southeast think about planting pine trees, they think that's land that's going away from cattle that we've ranched on our property for 3 to 8 generations. And that is also property that's not going to be growing hay to support that livestock.
Tammy Cheely.
There we go.
There she was. Then to be at another event, the Climate Creative Forum, which was out on Pier 57, to me, the farthest place you can actually go to. And there was a wonderful woman, and I am tap dancing to say Eva Brander Blackhawk. And she is from a group called Decolonizing Wealth. And she was talking about land rematriation and that they are raising money and they use many different ways to get land back to First Nations people. And some of it is raising money and buying like ranches and then bringing it back in. And she was saying that one of the ways that the community she works with think about it is you're thinking that you have borrowed the land from 7 generations ahead of you. And it's like, does Eva know that Tammy's essentially saying the same thing?
Yeah.
That these are people who care about the land. They're just coming from different points and they're saying exactly the same thing.
Definitely.
So that was a high. Low, let's see, what's the bud would be just getting through the humidity of this week. It's all about me.
In the rain.
Yeah. And just like, but I felt I did a much better job organizing myself around New York Climate Week. Like I felt much better intact. And then
you said less frenetic than last
year, less
right?
frenetic. Exactly. I felt like I said no. I didn't do the I'll triple book myself and then decide. I had some double books and had to decide, but it was much more intentional. And that's really, for anyone who's new to New York Climate Week, I think don't get FOMO.
Yeah.
Pick the events you want to go to and go.
Yeah. And the events happen all over Manhattan and Brooklyn. And so if you don't know the geography very well, like moi, it can definitely, I can do that and do that. And that's like generally on the island of Manhattan.
Yes. And you are like, no. I know. I heard the people going to New Lab, which no disrespect, but it's in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And I think, oh, what are you doing? That's so far away, but okay.
Well,
good for you.
Yeah. The other thing too with Climate Week is that it always comes on the heels of UNGA, the General Assembly. And so then there's huge traffic jams because, there's all of these.
Did you see Macron was caught on he was trapped by the police that he and his France delegation couldn't get somewhere. And the poor police officer's like, I understand President Macron, but President Trump is coming through and, you have to be here. We have to freeze this intersection. And that poor guy,
Also worth noting that on Tuesday of Climate Week, Trump was at the UN General Assembly and made something that could be called a speech about something that could be called words. We will not go
literally telling people that the climate, betting on the climate, is going to bring all your countries down.
Yeah, it was pretty unintelligible. On the Outrage and Optimism podcast, they talked a bit about how some folks were actually laughing in the room at him. Yeah. And I guess he also made some jokes, but there was also just some general chuckles of I think you walked into the wrong room. You don't know where you are.
This because that, the optimistic part, you meant we all would have the moment of therapy when you'd run into old friends and the like, but it really was. It was a group we were happy to be together.
Yes.
I felt it was a very positive week.
Yeah. One of the things we were talking about earlier was that collaboration was mentioned in almost every session.
Every single session.
Yeah. And I think it was an interesting week for many reasons. It was my first Climate Week in 3 years. So I was not here last year, but the shift, obviously, right now is we're in a completely different administration, completely different landscape in terms of climate funding and how we talk about this work. And I find these moments of our community to come together and share ideas and kind of speak beyond the talking points are even more valuable.
Yes.
When we are at these inflection points. And so it felt like it was, it was useful. It was interesting. There was lots of reconnections, but also that kind of therapy.
Yes. Oh, most definitely. Someone had said that we were moving from, and no diss to, but it was a lot of innovation talk, in the past, the past three.
Moonshot.
Everything's a moonshot and everything's again, no disrespect, but, direct air capture. Well, that's a very nascent, that is, and it's very expensive and and now you hear a lot of people talking about this is working for me. How, in fact, the company I'm working with right now, Trace Sarah, had a great event at Bain last night. And that was someone in the audience said, how do I find out about these wonderful things? And because they were talking about water reclamation that actually is paying for itself and someone's like, tell me more. Yeah. And one of the answers was read people's ESG and sustainability reports. They're putting it all there. Whether or not you're doing green hushing or anything or just hushing. People are putting interesting stories and interesting success stories and journey stories in their reports. And it's we need to be reading each other. And another thing they were talking about in the collaboration sense was if something's not serving your industry, you do have to kind of bond with your competitors and say we need to make a trade group for getting this to happen. And which I thought was, because that's what the National Manufacturers Association does or the National Retail Federation does. They get together and they lobby for things, even though they are all competing for consumer dollars or whatever. We need to do the same more.
Yeah. No, and I think speaking about the work that we do and like the different communities, one thing we both noticed was there is a lot more international folks
Yes.
than we expected. I think there's a lot of questions, whether you're in the US or outside the US, of like, what the hell is going on? And so it was interesting to see, like, there's a large delegation from Australia, some of which we hosted with Bush Heritage, but also at this AI event I went to, there was like representation from India and other like global nations. And it really doesn't seem like work is slowing down. And so the conversation I kept having was around, okay, this is like the state of play in the US right now. Who knows when it's going to frenetically change again? But look at all these other places across the world where it's actually continuing at a breakneck speed. One of the stats that I wrote down was that in India, they just passed the milestone that solar and storage is cheaper than coal, which is huge.
Yeah.
And so getting renewables cheaper, no matter what the Cheeto Prez says about it at the UN, is important. And just to remember that, like, we are part of a global economy, and many of the organizations that were showing up at Climate Week, maybe they're US headquartered, but they have international customers, employees, investors, and there's some stability outside of the US right now. And so they're looking to that. And those folks are coming to the US. And I felt like there was also a piece from the folks who were coming from abroad to say, okay, it seems insane here.
Yeah.
Like, what is it actually like on the ground? And to your point, it seems like, oh no, there's still a lot of work moving forward. Implementation is the name of the game.
Yes.
Maybe we're having to shift some of the language, but it's not slowing down.
Yes. And then you hear them talking about reporting, that it's all about, we don't have the numbers yet. I went to a really interesting panel on biodiversity data, and the Arbonics CEO was saying, Lizette, that if you have an acre of forest you're trying to save in Western Massachusetts and an acre of forest in Brazil, the biodiversity in Massachusetts is going to be less. There's fewer species there than there are in the rainforest. But do you say that forest acre is less valuable than and it's like immediately, and you're trying, and then you need those numbers, because if we're going to invest and we're all driving KPIs, how do you have KPIs if you don't know what it was just you just get in a loop of like, how do you put numbers on it, which is not the most romantic way to look at nature, of course.
Right.
But if back in my diversity, we would always say is what is not measured is not counted. And so these are the same things that we have to do for this. And then you meet the people who are trying to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And they too are coming from all over, which I tell you, last spring, you were hearing companies saying, we're not sending anyone, like we're frightened to come to America. We're not sure we can get in or get out.
Yeah.
And so it was very heartwarming. I met a young guy who's here on a 1-year program from Kashmir, which I love. India occupied Kashmir.
Yeah.
That's the full name. And I was like, thank you. I do not know my geography as well. And I totally admit it. To further that point, that panel started with a wonderful guy, Jatek, who's a poet from Staten Island, who did 3 poems about growing up on Staten Island. Because I immediately went, oh, Staten Island. And it was all about how, like the coolness of Staten Island totally changed my viewpoint. And I thought, why do I have a bias against Staten? It's just a massive land. And there's 500,000 people who live on it.
Yeah.
And somehow I'm dissing them for no reason. So just in the space of like 15 minutes, having my view changed on 2 different regions, very different. But yes, very happy to see. I also apologize for that guy that this was the year that he got to come here. But
well, I do think on the note of diversity, though, I did hear more conversations on equity than I've heard in a while.
Really?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, right, is this like the pressure of a reaction and the equal of opposite reaction, like all the pushback that's happening with DEI.
Yeah.
I do think it is bringing the conversation of equity around things like, where are we building data centers?
Yeah.
How is that impacting local communities, environmental justice, not just in the US, but globally? I saw that happening more. And I think that's both inclusion of how are we putting Indigenous leaders, Aboriginal leaders at like the seat of the table, to also like, what are your programs? Because I've heard behind closed doors that there's a lot of companies maybe that are still doing DEI work, but they're calling it something different.
Oh,
And I was at a series forum with a bunch of chief sustainability officers, and I kind of tested that theory. And some of them said yes. And some of them said, well, that program that just used to be available to, let's say, like women or people of color, we now have to make it open to everyone.
Interesting.
And it's so fascinating and it's so interesting. And I think part of me is like, well, at least the program's not going away. Like there's funding for people to, whether it's workforce development or these different things. But I do see that there's still a lot of organizations getting their feet under them.
Yes.
As so much with the administration is changing. Another like good nugget I heard from a conversation with some peers was around this idea of, okay, yeah, the big, beautiful bill has had a lot of like negative ramifications. How can you be going and talking with your like IR folks, your policy folks to understand what tax like repercussions did you lose?
Yeah.
And having them feel like they can come to the table to lobby for things.
Yes.
Yeah, Michael Kolbari, who used to lead sustainability at Starbucks and Levi's, he and I were talking about this quite a bit of just like, okay, like what is the economic landscape? How can you go into the different parts of your organization, advocate for things and show where there's kind of a win-win?
Oh, yes.
You still have these, renewable energy goals and all of these other items coming down the pike, which I thought was a really fascinating framing for engagement internally.
Yes. Sam Israel, who's the CSO at Bain, was saying, treat it as an opportunity to get feedback. That all of these things, as we see things, the pushback and it's an opportunity to build robust processes and capabilities and find the way to make your job easier through doing this kind of work. Like if you run towards, it's a nice to have, it's a good to do, that's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And so he's the one talking about like the water reclamation paying for itself. What an easy sell.
Right.
And that's immediately when the audience is like, where do I find out about this? So, yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think there was a lot of good kind of like networking connections. One other note that I heard in another session that I thought was good was how can we do a better job of educating the media about the nuances of this work? Because I think a lot of folks who are trying to drive sustainability, there'll be news coverage about like, oh, carbon offsets are dead or bad, or just like very simple. People just read the headlines. Yeah. And then you get these like crazed messages from investors or customers, what have you. And so like, how can these different industry groups, series, other folks, like how can there be an education that like, hey, more nuanced coverage of these topics is actually going to help these companies keep doing the work and not feel like they're always on the back foot.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting conversation. And also I think one thing that I was talking about and just thinking out loud about is, how can we lead our organizations and our broader industry coalitions with the idea that, knock on 10,000 planks of wood, this is not forever. This is a time and space that we are in politically and also economically. And how can we make sure not to, whether it's backpedal or push forward, but do so in a way that is thoughtful about, okay, this is a period in time and it will change again, but setting yourself up strategically for the long term.
Yes, definitely. And because I think if you're planning to have your business be around for years to come, that there's more coming. That this is a period of time and you need to be prepared for when the pendulum swings the other way. You better be ready.
Right. I do think there are a lot of organizations, as we saw this week with the thousands of events for Climate Week. There's a lot of organizations still doing this work. They're just maybe not talking about it as
There
much.
were companies everywhere.
Yeah.
I thought there were non-Americans everywhere, which, that was amazing. And there were companies everywhere, like companies on panels.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, there you are. Thank you so much.
And
Love
so
seeing you.
We might be moving into the next stage of like, maybe there aren't press releases about every little thing that companies do, but they are doing,
which I'm fine with.
They're building it into like, their broader investment and resourcing. They see it as climate risk. And so I think it's also interesting time for the maturity of the industry.
Yes. I think, and that's the making this stuff very real. It was very exciting when all the money was pouring into it and that everything was about like innovation, the X Prize. That was super fun. That was cool. And it really brought a lot of interesting projects forward. But, now we actually have to make enhanced rock weathering a thing and biochar a thing. And they're a thing to a certain extent, but they haven't scaled. We're not all buying biochar. We should all be buying biochar and putting it in our window boxes. I mean, as an end use of the biochar we're making. So
yeah, I like that.
I'm pro biochar. So.
That's what we've learned today.
Yes,
that's pro
biochar.
I need to go learn a little bit more about what biochar is, but right now I am pro.
Okay.
So on that note, we were just so excited to see so many friends get to hug people IRL. Multiple times I said, you're not a Zoom screen.
Yes.
Which was great. So if we got to see you at Climate Week, thank you so much for saying hi and sharing your insights with us. We really look forward to keeping y'all in the loop as we start thinking about season 4.
Yes, it's coming. Woohoo.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Happy Climate Week. Get some rest.
See ya. Thank you for joining us on Engaging ESG. Have a question for us to consider or a strategy you'd like us to cover? Email us today at engagingesg@gmail.com.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Engaging ESG today. It helps us grow, and even better, be sure to share the podcast with your favorite sustainability, diversity, or social impact colleague. And until next time, keep engaging.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.